Hello and welcome to Rive Reflections in Veterinary Education. This episode is going to be a topic, and it was my topic to choose this month. And I wanted to talk about, I've had a few colleagues kind of approach me recently and wanting to know, like, hey, I'm interested in education. That's something I'm excited about, I'm passionate about, and what additional training can I do? What options are out there? And I mean, these are things that have ranged from, like, what are CE opportunities, what are workshops, to, hey, I might consider doing, an advanced degree, and what's out there. So I thought that's probably pretty common, actually, that people are thinking about these things. And so I thought that could be a really fun discussion for the three of us to have here. And it might be helpful for people just to kind of hear our thoughts and our ideas, and what are the pros and cons of this, and what makes something a good fit for somebody depending on where they are in their career or what their aspirations are. So that's the topic that I wanted to discuss, and I thought it would be kind of a fun one.
Yeah.
So yeah. um, I, I'm kind of, we're all still in our journeys, right? Like, none of us, we're never done. But maybe it would be good. I don't know that we've ever done this. We've had guests on, but I don't know that we've ever each kind of shared our own backgrounds, like, just succinctly, but just to keep everybody, so they know where we're coming from. So maybe we could start with that. Eric, do you want to kind of talk about your, like, educational, more that than obviously the
Yeah.
veterinary side?
Yeah. As an educator. Yeah. I mean, I, like most people, learned by the apprenticeship of observation, which is, the vast majority of instances in academia. And so in terms of formal training, I would go try to do CE opportunities and, things that were offered by the university, like, hey, learn to do this better. And so kind of piecemeal improved that way. But really the major step was taking a master's degree in sport pedagogy. And really that was a degree that was like a train the trainer sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had to learn, basic pedagogical concepts to do so. And that really helped form a foundation for me. And that that was my main source, I would say, of formal information slash instruction. And then kind of since then, just ongoing CE as it comes up from the individual institutions. Yeah, that's my background. Catherine, you want to go?
Yeah, so I went to vet school a lot later in life. I was about 31 when I started vet school. And before that, I had been in the military. And that's actually where I discovered that I really enjoyed education, because I had to update a curriculum for my last duty assignment. So I actually went and got a master's degree before I went to vet school. So my master's was in educational leadership, and it prepared me to go into K-12 teaching, which I was terrified to do and will never do, because my K-12 teachers have all of my respect, because I could never do that. They're terrifying. But then because I thought that was what I was going to do when I got out of the military, because I needed a career, and obviously I hadn't gotten to vet school at that point. So when I got to vet school, I actually pretty much knew that I wanted to go into some type of educational something. And the more I got into vet school, the more I realized that people really didn't know how to teach. And I think there were a lot of people out there who probably wanted to learn how to teach and knew that they weren't very good, but maybe, again, didn't have the tools. And so I wanted to be one of those people that could have the tools. So I had a master's degree in education before I went to vet school, which in some ways maybe made it harder than it needed to be. And then I practiced for a year or two, and then realized that, I knew that practice wasn't going to be my place. So I ended up getting a PhD in science education. I actually tried to do a dual PhD in education with my DVM, and I literally couldn't get anybody in the education department to talk to me, which was really strange. So yeah, I kind of always knew this was where I was going to land, and I wasn't sure exactly what it would look like or how it would end up. But so yeah, both my degrees are in education. I have kept myself current in education through somewhat learning on the job, right? Because the things that we do in veterinary education sometimes aren't so great, and I have to read about that. And then by writing a textbook or having other people help me write a textbook. So that's kind of what I've done, and where my career has started. So I'm sort of the unusual one, I guess. I always kind of knew this is where I was gonna end up.
Yeah. Yeah,
The
I
dual
definitely did
degree
not.
Yeah, the dual degree thing is interesting, your comment on that, because I've also tried to figure out a way that we could do like a master's in education with the DVM or a master's with our
Yeah.
residents, and similarly been met with, that's we don't really care about that from the education
Mhm.
department. I'm like, huh, wow,
Mm.
it's weird.
Yeah, it's really weird. So I'll be interested to hear Bobby's thoughts on that because I know you're working on that. So
Yeah, yeah. Yes, I am. So for me, I went to vet school with plans of being a general practitioner. Education was never on my radar. I in undergrad, a bunch of my friends and teammates were in education. I was like, I have no desire to do that. Teaching, kind of like I think Catherine, your experience with K-12. I'm like, I knew, like, I remember from being a student, like that sounds terrible. Like I don't want anything. But when I did my internship, which again, my goal was never to specialize, but it was in an academic setting, and I was now thrust as an intern right into at times a teaching role to people who are a whole year behind me, but still, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So by the time I made the decision to pursue a residency to specialize, I knew that like teaching was going to be part of that. But like Eric, it was modeling. I didn't even know that was a thing you could specialize in. I'm like, I already did my thing. And so, but it was getting into the job and realizing, like, as you said, like there are a lot of people who want to be good at this, but just don't even know how. So it was many years down the road. So it was CE, and it was actually learning about the Veterinary Education Collaborative. That was the first time I went to that. I was like, oh my God, there are people who like this is what they do. And so it was mostly yeah, continuing education, local things, regional things, self, figuring things out. And then I I had somebody, one of the many mentors we all have, who was like, you should like really ask to pursue this and like work that into like your job description that you're going to do advanced training. And so then I'm halfway through, a little bit more than halfway through a master's in educational psychology right now. And so now our cohort is definitely gone the route of, advanced, degrees in education. And so we can talk about that, but I don't want to limit it to that. That's certainly not the only thing that is available. But yeah, to like what Catherine, you were talking about, the dual thing, and Eric not having a great reception. Currently working on developing a curriculum for a residency in emergency critical care. That would be a clinician educator track, that they would get a master's. We're still working out the details of exactly what that would look like. But again, it would be a master's that has an education bend. Now, I'm not one to like wait around and ask for permission for other people to like so it's not necessarily going to be through the School of Education, but the goal is to collaborate with folks in like mostly the educational psychology department here. So some of the courses would be courses that we would take through them, but it's not going to be under their umbrella. It would still be under the research and graduate studies group. So that's one way we're getting around it. Like, we don't need you to sign off on this. We just need to kind of help with some of the foundational teaching. And so I'm hoping that will be, I'm actually really excited. I think it could be really good. So to go off a little bit. So that's one potential option for people down the road. Like, my hope is that we can create a program like this, and it can be a model for other places that want to do that kind of dual residency masters. But it doesn't have to be the traditional masters that everyone is thinking about. Some people are like, that's not really my jam, but education might be. But until that becomes commonplace, we've all kind of gone in various ways, advanced training, but there's so many other ways that folks can do that. So I want to talk about that. And like, so Eric, you and I did, well, really all three of us did masters in different fields. Catherine, you did a PhD also in a different field. So it can be overwhelming. And I can tell you, when I was trying to figure out what I was going to do my master's in, I felt a little overwhelmed at times and had to talk to other people like, well, what's the difference between a master's in higher education versus educational psychology? Like, there's so many different titles. So those are some of the things I wanted to delve into. So maybe Eric, could you talk a little bit about how you chose sports pedagogy? We've talked about this a little bit before, but maybe you can share a little bit more about why that worked for you.
Yeah, honestly, it's when are the classes available for a program, right? So the two
Yeah.
masters that I have are designed for working professionals. So the sport pedagogy was designed for current PE teachers. So the classes are held after hours, and that's when I'm free. So, that honestly, that was it.
Wow.
Because at least at the time, now this is probably different in the modern age with access to online, non-contiguous curricula and that sort of thing. But back in the day, those were hard to come by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this was the degree program that I could get that also made sense for me,
Yeah.
because my interest obviously, I'm an anesthesiologist, but my primary hobbies are swing dancing and martial arts. And so these are very, very movement related things. And the way I pitched it to my boss is about half of what we do is psychomotor skills training, right? Intubating, catheter placement, same as throwing a softball, right? Same as dribbling a basketball, like same. So that's how I was able to pitch it. And it was true, like this wasn't
Yeah.
a gimmick. It was like, no, I genuinely am better now as a educator. But it was purely schedule based. And
Yeah.
if educational psychology had classes after hours, that probably would have been my preference. Or some kind of measurement testing sort of
Mm.
oriented masters, because I do like the research end of things. Yeah, so convenience.
I
Yeah.
had,
No, I mean, that's fair.
I had no
Go ahead,
idea you
Catherine.
were a swing dancer. The little
Yeah,
tidbit.
for sure.
I
Yeah,
know.
we do other social dancing, but
Mm, so
swing is our
much.
primary dance.
That's
Well,
amazing.
that's
I love
awesome.
that.
Yeah.
Eric, can I ask, did you do your master's? Was it part-time, full-time? How quickly did you go through that?
I did like one or two classes a semester,
Okay. Yeah.
and I think it took me, and I did a thesis master, so I did a research project. I think it took me maybe 4 or 5 years to
Yeah.
get through. But and for the most part, the content was fun and relevant. There was one
Yeah.
class that I took about media in sports that was all about like, organized sports like NFL and all that kind of stuff, and how much money
Oh.
they make and how and all that. I'm like, I don't care about any of this. Um, but and then there was a methodology, a stats methodology class, which I could have taught. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, all right, I guess I'm
Yeah.
here for this.
Yeah.
But other than that, I learned a lot. And it was a pretty flexible program at the time.
Yeah.
Very cool.
And it's fun getting into other disciplines and finding out like what they're interested in. Like my lab, their thing was documenting expertise in education. They were specifically looking at golf instructors. And so that's what they spent a lot of time focusing on. So we had like a whole, literature review class about expertise and how do we define that. And I've taken a lot of that content and like, no one's looked at this in veterinary medicine. Let's do it in vet med,
Yeah.
those cross-disciplinary opportunities for research, there's a ton of
Mm.
low-hanging fruit in vet med because we just haven't done it.
Yeah.
I'm really glad you brought that up, Eric. That's one of the things I wanted to get into in this, because there are a number of specific like veterinary education programs out there now. So maybe Catherine, maybe you could speak a little bit to that about your thoughts on, if somebody wanted to pursue, say, a master's, right? What are your thoughts on a veterinary specific there's several of them out there now, right? Versus don't worry about it being veterinary. Maybe find something that is more broadly applicable. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, so I only know of two. I know RVC and then LMU have veterinary specific degree programs, and RVC's been around for quite some time and LMU's newer. I think for me, it's less about whether it's veterinary specific or broad. It's more about what is it you're hoping to get out of it? What is it that you want to learn? What are you interested in? So Eric's been really good about connecting me with a couple of individuals that he's worked with that were students or residents that were interested in veterinary education. And I've had conversations with them and they're like, well, where do I go get a master's degree in education? And I'm like, well, what kind of master's degree do you want to get? And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like,
Exactly.
well, just like veterinary medicine, you can specialize in education. So do you want to do sports pedagogy, which at the time I didn't even know was a thing? Do you want to do educational psychology? Do you want to do psychometrics? Do you want to, assessment? Do you want to do a specific content area where mine was in science education, but there's math education and there, chemistry education? Or do you want to do more of a practice-based thing like an EDD where you're learning more about higher education administration or higher education, program assessment? And they sort of start thinking, oh, they get the same sort of overwhelmed look, like I have no
Overwhelmed.
idea, right? And so the short answer is, I think that if you really want to learn about clinical education and training, that going into a veterinary education degree program is really good for you. It's something you would probably get decently in a master's of medical education as well. But there are obviously some unique things about veterinary education and veterinary clinical practice that you might not get. If you're really just interested in getting a broad base of all of the things out there that education really can do and the kinds of information you can get about it, then you have to kind of start considering the other types of programs that are out there. We had a student who started in the Masters of Veterinary Education, the very first cohort, and after a semester, she ended up not coming back. And so I reached out to her. I was like, hey, you know, we're not upset. I'm just curious as to why you decided to change. And she's like, look, I really had a great experience there. What I discovered, though, is that I needed organizational leadership and change.
Mm.
And I didn't necessarily need the I wanted the education theory and philosophy, but it helped me understand that what I really needed was organizational change. And
Mm.
so, you know, I think if you dip your toe into any program, and you need to just try it out, you'll probably figure out pretty quickly whether it's the right thing for you. I think RBC and LMU both have great programs, especially if you want to really get that clinical veterinary education aspect of it, and maybe a little bit broader base from the LMU. But if you're really just interested in education, I think there's any number of programs that you could be really happy and successful in.
And yeah, those are 2 degree programs, but there's a number of certificate programs as well, which I think, you know, to your point, if you're like, if you get asked that question, you're like, I don't even know, like, this is overwhelming. Those might be a good place to start. To kind of see like, okay, I'm not committing to, you know, quite as much time, probably not quite as much money. And I want to see like what gets me excited about this. Because I think there's more of those that are available now in a lot of different places. Georgia, Tennessee are programs that have those. And so those are good starting points for folks that are like, I'm not really sure. The other thing is like, you can often like take a course. It doesn't even have to be part of a degree at like a local university, you know, find like to try some of those things out. But kind of like what Eric was saying, one of the things that I have been finding that I really enjoy is the opportunity to take courses with people from completely different disciplines, right? Outside of medicine, outside of veterinary medicine. And it's forced me at a number of occasions to get outside of my little bubble and recognize that actually, you know, in some ways, yes, obviously we have things that are unique to vet med, but like a lot of things are not actually that unique. And if we just think about it a little bit, open our minds, like, you know, something that they're trying in history education could probably also apply here. I just have to maybe be a little creative to tweak things. And I think that's forced me to not think about this very narrow way. You know, we've all been, you know, in this for years, and we've, you know, seen this the same way. And it's so easy to get stuck in this mold and not even realize you're stuck in it. And so I've really appreciated the opportunity to interact with people who are in vastly different disciplines for that purpose. And so that's one of the things that I talk about with folks is, you know, it depends. And I think your point, Catherine, is a good one. Like, you know, what are the goals? Why are you doing this? It's interesting. Like when I was looking at, you know, doing this research for myself, trying to figure out what kind of program I wanted, a lot of masters of higher education like had come up. And for me, those were like, okay, if you want to be an administrator like that, if that is your long-term goal, or to, and I was like, well, no, I like, that's not quite what I'm looking for. Like, I want to understand how learning works. That's really what it was. And so for me, that's where educational psychology really hit the sweet spot for me. That's what I get fascinated about. It's just like, oh, this, like how our brains work and how we actually learn. So for me, that was really great. And, you know, the first course I took, I'm like, oh yeah, this is totally the program for me. These are my people for sure. So I think your point is really good too. Like, you might try a course out and be like, no, this isn't quite what I thought it was going to be, because education is such a broad topic. And I think people don't realize necessarily how broad it is. So
yeah, I also find it really interesting for people who have come into education without maybe the formal training or even sort of additional educational related training, how bent out of shape they get when they get called on their BS, right? Like when you're having a conversation with somebody and they're spouting off information and you look at them and you say, well, but actually this is based in this research, it's X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, but I, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like, okay, so you're basically pretending that you know what you're talking about. And the fact that people can pretend and get away with it in education so regularly, I think is one of the things that really frustrates me, because there's just this lack of, and I definitely think it's getting better. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely getting better, but there's still among some people this lack of respect for education as a discipline and everything that it brings to the table. And I liken it to this idea that, if I went out and I practice, or if I went out and shadowed a veterinarian for 10 years and then came to you and said, oh, I'm a veterinarian because I've been shadowing one for 10 years. Now, suddenly, are you going to let me do surgery? They would be like, you're out of your freaking mind. There's no way.
I mean, I don't know. We are really short on surgeons right now, so maybe.
But you know what I'm saying?
No,
but then somebody comes, anybody can walk around and say, oh, I'm a teacher, I'm an educator. And nobody says, well, where did you go to school? Where did you get your credentials? How long have you been doing this? What is your experience? And I'm not saying that we should be that way, but it's just very interesting to me that everybody thinks that they can call themselves a teacher and they can get away with that. And yet they're so defensive when they're then called on the fact that they don't actually know what they're doing. They don't have the words to describe it. They don't have the language to describe it. And so for me,
and they don't like, they understand evidence-based medicine, but they don't understand evidence-based teaching. Like you'll give them data from a reasonably well-designed study and they'll give you anecdote.
Right.
And I'm like, I don't care what your experience is with this. You're wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like when I was going through vet school in my clinical year, I was getting ready to go into my clinical year, and there was this uproar because our associate dean for academic affairs was trying to implement a rubric for clinical clerkships. And it was like, it was like the world was going to end, and people were like, I can't believe you're going to make me do more paperwork. I know within an hour whether this student is going to be successful or not. I've had 20 years of and it's just like fantastic. But guess what? Rubrics work just like checklists, because that's kind of what they are in a way, right? So it's very interesting to me. But I will say that it's encouraging that more and more people, I've had, like Bobby, I've had multiple conversations with people. I had one just the other day, in fact, with a faculty member at Virginia Tech, who was like, hey, Catherine, I was told that you know about education, and I'm really interested in doing this educational research project. I have no idea how to do educational research. Can you help me? And I was like, yes, I can,
Yes.
And I looked at him and I was just like, thank you so much for being willing to ask, right? Because there's so many people there who think that because they do bench science research or they do whatever research, that immediately they can then do educational research. And it was just it was a nice conversation.
That's nice.
And I'm having more and more of those conversations, which I think is really heartening. It's I know when I finished my PhD at that time in early, like the mid 20 teens, I was like one of 6 people who had a DVM and a PhD in education. And now there's many, many more of us, and many who have masters in education and who have other training in it. So it is changing, but it's always an issue.
It's funny though, laughing the whole time you're talking about this, because in the courses that I'm taking, we have a relatively small program. So, I get to take the same professors a few times in the educational psychology courses, but they feel that same thing about like people who are just like out there and getting a lot of like people who, big names in education, but it's based on, either junk science or just opinions. And so like, you start bringing up somebody who like has a background in educational psychology and just mention learning styles to them, and it's so funny. So like he's amazing, and he's like trying very hard, like, to be very nice. And, he's like, here's where it is. But like, this is garbage. And then some of the papers that you can read. Oh, it's amazing.
There was a survey we got sent out recently. One of the questions was, do you think learning styles are evidence-based? Like, yes, no. And I was like, oh, this is a check to see if the people responding to this survey know about teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
exactly.
totally, it is so funny because yeah, so like just it's just like they get so angry. It's like all these people talking about this, and like how many things were out there that like teachers were, it was being pushed on them and they're
Oh yeah.
giving these tests to their students, and it was making it to higher education. I saw it, I still see it, I still come
Yep.
across it where it's like, oh well, yeah, but I'm, how many students have been like, well, I'm a visual learner. And I was
Yes.
like, well, it turns out you're going to actually have to use your hands to put this catheter in. So yeah, so at any rate, I just kind of laugh about that. That seems like that's the one that gets under the educational psychologist's skin, is the learning styles, I think, more than any others. But yeah, so it's certainly not, unique to veterinary medicine that education is sometimes not valued the way it should be. But it's the other thing that you mentioned, Eric, that I really try to think about, to because I've been trying to get education related things in non-education settings. Like, so I've been trying to push at like my, at IVEX, my, emergency discipline, to be like, hey, this stuff is really interesting. But when I make my titles, it's like evidence-based education. Like I really try to drive that point home, that this is not just like, this is what I think. It's like, here is what the
Yeah.
evidence says. And I really make a point to draw like, here's some, studies that support these findings. And here are these things, hoping that it will resonate a little bit more with some of those people, but also to drive home that point, like there is evidence that can tell us how to do this better. So just like you wouldn't just say like, yeah, I'll just wing it. This is a disease I've never managed before, but I could probably figure it out. I once heard about a case of this, so I'll just, you go and look it up, and you figure out the evidence, and we can do the same thing with teaching. And so let's say somebody's like, I don't think I'm ready for a master's. Like I'm not at that point. I'm not ready for a PhD. But I still I want to improve. What are some other specific strategies you would suggest for somebody who, is like, maybe that's something I'll do later, but now it's not the right time for me for whatever reason?
So I think there's lots of opportunities. I think there's lots of, well, now we have 2 textbooks out on the market, so they can read those. They can delve into the Journal of Veterinary Medical Education, and they can read a lot of really good research there. They can find people who have experience in education or who have that training and sort of have conversations there. I think I would like to see more and more pressure on administrations to create like local, like education related professional development opportunities. It's something that I was really hoping to do at Virginia, Maryland, and wasn't able to get that quite off the ground. But a lot of people will say, go to your local Center for Teaching Excellence or Center for Teaching and Learning. And I would say yes, but with some caution. So when I was doing my dissertation, one of the things that I ended up having to do as a result of the research that I did was sort of investigate Centers for Teaching Excellence or Centers for Learning and Development, or whatever they're called. Centers for Excellence in Teaching and Learning, however, whatever they're called. And I did just sort of it was very non-scientific, so I'll put that out there. But I basically did sort of a survey and sort of put in all the different titles that those types of centers go through, and came up with 20 or 30 of them that I was actually able to go to websites and find the credentials of the individuals who are the directors or in charge of those. And about 80% of them had nobody on their staff that actually had education training. So they were people who were very experienced educators. They had been in higher education for a long time and teaching, and had good teaching, evaluations and won awards, but they actually didn't have training in philosophy and theory and sort of pedagogy and those kinds of things. And so I say that as a caveat because I think they can do a very good job. And I'm not saying that you have to have that advanced training and education to be able to do a good job. But I will also say that you're not necessarily getting sort of the foundational stuff that's really important, to be able to really say, well, I'm a constructivist and this is why, right? Like I understand cognitivism, I understand positivism, I understand behaviorism. And what really resonates with me is constructivism, and specifically this type of constructivism. And that I think is something that we don't think about enough when we're teaching, is like how our approach to teaching really influences the way we interact with students, the way we prepare for our lessons, the types of activities that we choose to do or not do. And more than anything, I think going through my training really helped me understand what I did in the classroom the things that worked and why they worked, the things that didn't work and why they didn't work, and how I could talk to people about it, you know, and say, this is why I do this, and it's rooted in this theory or this philosophy. So that's, I mean, there's a broad range of things and opportunities for people. It might just be talking to somebody, you know, it might be talking to somebody who has training and education and saying, hey, I'm really interested in this. The conversation I had the other day with, you know, the faculty member who recognized that he didn't really understand educational research and wanted to learn more about it. I mean, I think that's a great first step, is just A, acknowledging that it's a discipline and there's something to be learned and you don't know it all, and B, talking to somebody who does. I mean, that's always a great place to start.
I think about the theory piece that you were mentioning a lot, honestly, and like I'm a post-positivist is how I approach things. And what's funny is like I've always have been, and then when I learned about it, I was like, oh hey, yay, there's a there's a thing that describes how I approach the world. And it was surprising to me when I was learning those foundational concepts how useful it was to understand the theory and understand those things in a way that just practicing. I'd been an educator for, I don't know, like 12 years or something by the time I started my program. I was like, oh, this would have been good on day one. Like, I wish I had gotten this then.
Exactly. I'm still saying that. Because there are a lot of things that you sort of stumble across either through trial and error.
Your cat is hysterical
cracking me up. Yes, it's particularly very interested in the topic tonight. But yeah, same experience, Eric, where I'm just like, oh, this would have been so helpful to know a decade ago. And I'm like, okay, I've got to compose that apology letter to all those students from all those years that sorry, you had to be the ones to help me learn why that didn't work. But I think also getting back to what you had said, Catherine, is like just finding somebody local. I think more, so if you're in a vet school, like if you're at a university, I think more and more veterinary schools have employed, like in their own ranks, specific people who maybe don't have a DVM, but do have advanced training and education, whether that is advanced degrees or they're an instructional designer or, you know, something along that is a good place to start. And getting input from those folks on resources, having conversations, you know, really getting involved locally, I think can be really good. Again, it is hard though, because this group right here is a little bit biased, but it is really hard because the theory really has made an impact for me. You know, so how do you get those snippets before, without committing to, you know, a full advanced degree? And you can, you know, I think what I'm like, yeah, if you do that, then you're either going to be like, all right, that's maybe not for me, or you're like, I have to know more.
I mean, I think, you know, I think there's good chapters out there about theory that can kind of give you, like the Hodgson and Pelzer has a really good overview. I think, you know, our textbook probably has a really good in-depth view of philosophy and theory, but to both of your points, I agree 100%. Like, I'm a constructivist. I've always been a constructivist. When I finally learned about constructivism, I was like, oh, hey, this is really fascinating. And now I know why I do this and kind of my worldview, right? But I think what is also really helpful to me is that I'm thinking back to my experience when I delivered the Becoming a Veterinary Professional course last fall, and how awful I felt when I was teaching it, because all I was doing was standing up there and delivering someone else's slides. And that is not how I like to teach. That's not my comfort zone. That's not what I'm good at. That's not what I enjoy. And I don't think it's particularly engaging for students. But I didn't have the time and the bandwidth and the ability to sit down and really shape that course the way I had hoped that I would. And so I found myself in this place of significant discomfort in teaching, because what I was doing and what I am good at and feel is really good for me and my students were completely at odds. And so for those individuals who have learned by apprenticeship, right? Because most people have in our experience and in our area, I think that understanding that theory and understanding some of those philosophies can help them then come to a point where they're like, well, geez, this is why I suck at teaching, right? It's not because I'm a bad teacher. It's because I've been doing something that I'm not comfortable doing and I don't believe in, even though I didn't have the words to. And now I know, right? Like, I'm a positivist, so doing all this active learning crap is not for me. I'm much better at standing up and doing slides and just telling people what I know in an entertaining way. that's okay. I mean, there's no judgment there. But if what you're doing and you're teaching does not match what your sort of core philosophy is, and you don't recognize that or have a way to recognize that, it's like taking an internist and telling them they're going to be a surgeon. It just doesn't work very
Yeah.
well.
It's probably important to point out though too, like it's not like you get a master's in one of these programs and suddenly your teaching is perfect. Like there still is going to be
I mean, maybe
some
not for
trial and
you,
error.
but no.
I mean, I guess I don't know because I did it the other way around, but I still feel confident that, right? Like it's not like you're going to take a program and it's going to say, all right, you do this, you do this, you do this, and everything will be perfect.
Right.
But again, it gives you that understanding of the theory of the foundation that you can then apply to your specific scenario and much more quickly, I think, figure out why something is working and something is not, and how to more efficiently make a change that has a much higher likelihood of working. So much like evidence-based medicine, just because it says it's going to work, maybe 70% of the time, it doesn't mean it's going to work 100% of the time, and the conditions change, and all sorts of things. It works in a dog, that doesn't mean it's going to work in a cat. But again, having those tools, having those tools in your toolbox is super duper helpful.
And understanding.
I'll say to the topic of like, how do people get these things? Like you mentioned, a lot of institutions might have internal processes, and this, in my opinion, is both good and bad. Like so we're doing this at Auburn right now, where we're doing a certificate or teaching and learning for the vet school that is maybe going to be a model for the rest of the university. So we have these modules that the Center for Teaching and Learning, we call it the Big EO Center, is developing. And then we're trying to come up with like a clinical teaching module, because to Catherine's point, clinical teaching is different. Like apprenticeship teaching. Most people who think about education do not think about apprenticeship education. So we're trying to do that. But anyways, I feel like we're just like reinventing the wheel. It's like, do we need to do this at however many vet schools there are now, 30 plus, does everyone need to reinvent the wheel, or can we all just do like Tennessee's program or Georgia's program, or,
Yeah. I was going to say, I also think that it's really important to learn that education, and to be fair, education people don't always want to admit this, but education is a social science. It's not a hard, quote unquote, hard science. It's not sort of like you can create this, double-blinded study, and you can, randomized control trial, and you can do a treatment for this and you can't do that, because A, you're dealing with people and that wouldn't be ethical, but B, because you could have the same teacher with the same class of students at exactly the same time with exactly the same content, blah, 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 in a different year and still have some different results. And so I think we spend a lot of our time as veterinarians teaching veterinary students that they have to live in the gray, but our veterinarians who go into the classroom must also learn to live in the gray in a different way. And I think a lot of them struggle with that as well. And so I think understanding sort of that part of it is really helpful, and talking to people who have that background and knowledge and experience and can help them understand that no matter how hard you try, you're not going to reach every student, and you're not going to be able to get every student to learn or love the way that you learn and love. And that's okay, right? Like it's okay. It's hard and it's frustrating, but it's okay, because it's at its heart, it is a social science, and that's when it struggles.
But it's nice to have more tools in your toolbox, so that this student, it's not working, you're like, okay, well, let's try it this way, that can be really helpful.
You could draw a parallel with medicine in that regard, right? Like,
absolutely,
there are some patients where I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do this thing and it works, and there are others that I'm like, oh, I do this thing, it doesn't work, okay, I'll try this other thing. And there's someone like, I don't know what the hell is going on here, and just I walk out of the room, I'm like, I don't know, somebody else figure this out.
Well, and there are some patients that you can do everything right and they still die, or they still don't do what
And also there are some patients you can do everything wrong and they're going to do okay. And that's also true in teaching, where, like you, and I mean, this is what we've been doing in education for decades, right? Is that we, in vet school, right, we pick the brightest and the best students who can independently get through somebody who is just droning on and like breaking all of the educational rules, and they're going to thrive. And if we keep doing that, those students are probably going to thrive. That just, and I'll, oh my gosh, this is one of the things that kills me a little bit. reviewing like exam questions and looking at like a multiple choice question that breaks every multiple choice question rule. And they go, yeah, but like most of the students got it right. Like, but who are these students? These are students who have been taking, they've learned how to take tests well. Is that what you are testing? Are you wanting to identify which of our students are good test takers? Because spoiler alert, it's all of them.
Yeah.
Like what we're really looking for is, do they understand the material? And so what are your goals? You know, so, but this idea that, oh no, this empiric evidence right here tells me that this is a good question. I was like, no, that's not what it tells you. But so it's so funny though how we'll do that, but we do it in medicine too. Like, to be fair, we do that in medicine a lot.
Yeah,
I've been doing this treatment for 20 years and it works great. We're like, yeah, that's your anecdotal evidence, which is not the same.
Yeah, no, I mean, I remember having so many dogs that came in that I suspected were GI obstructions, right? Like foreign bodies. And you know, you do the diagnostics and you're like, I don't know for sure. And you talk to the client and you're like, listen, had a lot of these. Oftentimes we go in, there's nothing there. But like 100% of the time, in my experience, you go in and you do an exploratory and they wake up and they're happy and everything's much better. Why?
We called it the therapeutic stir.
Yeah.
I was actually taught that phrase in school, the therapeutic stir.
It's like, I have no idea why they're better. I wouldn't recommend that you just take every dog that has GI distress that might be a foreign body to surgery, but like literally 100% of the time they were better after they woke up.
Yeah.
Correlation, not causation, right? So 100%.
I think there's also something to be said for the idea that you can stumble upon the right way.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like you were saying, Bobby, like, oh, this is the way I've always done it. Like there are some practitioners out there that are, for example, using xylazine as part of their anesthetic protocol who have not had an anesthetic death. I don't know statistically how that happened, but they're out there, you know, and it's like they just like nailed exactly in their setting how to run this protocol that is not a good protocol. And I imagine in the same way, there are some educators that do it for 20 years and like eventually focus down and like this works for me. And you know, as someone objectively looking at it, you're like, okay, like, yeah, you figured it out somehow, even
how
without.
long did it take you, and how many students?
No, for sure. How many students suffered in that process? Yeah. But I guess I just wanted to. The thought that came into my head is, one does not need advanced training to necessarily be a good teacher. It can happen, but it is way easier with the training.
Yeah, 100%.
Like it's easier, it's faster. And again, if somebody comes to challenge you, you're going to be better equipped to like, here's why, here's my reasoning. But no, there are lots of people who are really, really good educators. And maybe some of it is luck. Maybe some of it is they had good models. Maybe some of it is good trial and error that they took that, you know, either consciously or subconsciously and said, okay, here's how I'm going to adjust. But I think there can be a blending. It can be somewhere in the middle. You don't necessarily have to go and get advanced degrees in order to do this. But I mean, for me, as soon as somebody comes to me as like, hey, I'm interested in education and I want to be better. I'm like, well, that's 50% of it right there. Like,
I think it's more than 50%.
Yeah, it probably is, right? Like the fact that you want to, you're going to get better, right? Yeah. You're going to. Here are some things that are going to help you and make that journey less frustrating, probably a little shorter, and more enjoyable for you, honestly. Because if you're excited about being good at teaching, then I think all of this stuff becomes really fascinating, and really like, ooh, I want to learn more about this. And so, you know, I guess that's a little bit where I'm coming from. I didn't want this to necessarily become like, you really should just go and get that advanced degree, but like, I mean, it is a good idea.
Yeah. I mean, I will say though, that and this is going to sound really bizarre coming from you, but at some level, sometimes ignorance is bliss too, right? Like, because I mean, that sounds terrible, but it's like, I'm sitting here thinking about all the times that everybody misuses the term didactic, and it drives me crazy because I'm like,
I think of you every time I hear somebody say it.
It doesn't mean classroom or lecture based. And so like, it would be much more fun in my life if I didn't know that.
So funny. Every time we're in the same room and I hear somebody say that, Kathleen, I'm like, Kath.
I know. It's like didactic. It's like best practices. It's like learning style. And it's like, you know, your head just wants to explode. But I'm again,
I know what you mean though, where sometimes you're like, it's with medicine, right? Like if your own pets are sick, you're like, I wish I didn't know any of this.
100%.
Or if you've got, so no, I understand what you're saying. But again, I think if you have somebody who is listening to this podcast, like already, like they're thinking about education and how to make it better. And so the ignorance is bliss that ship has probably sailed for that crew. But while I agree with you, I think that in this setting, if you want to be better, one, you're going to, and there are lots of tools available for you and lots of opportunities. So starting small, I think is good. Attending conferences, attending local CE lectures. I think, again, either at your institution or a nearby institution are all good options. I really like the idea of like taking a course or two before committing to something to find out, like, does this feel like the right fit? I probably should have done that. I a little bit lucked out. And I was like, yep, educational psychology is for me. But I think that's a really smart idea. But I also think like we have like a certificate. The educational psychology program here also offers a certificate. It's like 3 courses. That's a good way to start. So look into things like that. We didn't talk
Another
about
idea that comes to mind that we haven't talked about yet is doing some peer observations.
Oh, that's a great idea.
I did a whole class, like I attended class about how to do peer observations, and there's a system that we have in place through CVEC and whatnot, but just having someone sit in on your class and share their thoughts, I mean, that's tremendous. And in that same vein, watching yourself, like record yourself and watch yourself, like I learned so much about watching myself teaching that it just helps facilitate reflection, and if you are a thoughtful, reflective person, that can help tremendously.
I think
good for you.
Being a peer observer is also really helpful, right? And I did that for several years in my first job. That was part of my role, was to facilitate sort of peer observations and give feedback. And I mean, I learned as much about myself and my own teaching and other people's practices. And I was like, oh, wow, they're doing some really cool things and I'm going to steal that. I would always tell them that, like, you're doing, this is amazing. I never thought to do that. So I think you can learn a lot that way too. So all 3 of those aspects.
I agree.
For sure.
I don't know how much I cannot go back and watch myself later. I'm good for you, Eric. I find that what I learn in that process is how much I hate doing that. That it's such a struggle for me. But it is when I've forced myself to do it, I agree it is really helpful, but it's also just like, oh my God, and it was like, I hate everything. Is that really what I sound like? Oh yeah. So, but it is a really good exercise if you can stomach it. But I agree, Catherine, what you were saying, like watching other people teach and getting trained how to do peer observations, that training, that's one thing I've experienced is, having people like, oh my gosh, like this is, people who are experienced educators, right? They've been doing it for many, many years, and maybe even have some advanced training. And then they get the specific training on this, but this is really good. It got me thinking about things for my own teaching. Also watching other people and learning really good things they're doing and stealing those. And then that process of having someone else observe you, ideally in a nice formative way, right? To say like, here are all the great, so not, separating that from promotion or, official evaluations, but just having somebody to sit down and be like, okay, here are the things you're doing really well. Do more of these things. And then have you thought about trying this other thing? Or, what if you, have you considered, doing this or, just thinking about what are the things you want to improve. All right, let's come up with some ideas. But yeah, a really good point, Eric. Getting that peer observation in all aspects is really good.
Before I forget this, because I'm old, I have to go back to your comment about people listening to this podcast already sort of ignorance is probably out the window. But and this is like completely out of left field, but my father-in-law was talking to my husband this evening and he was like, oh, I gotta go, Catherine's getting ready to go do her podcast. And his dad was like, she has a podcast? How many people listen to it? John's like, how many people listen to your podcast? I was like, I don't know, like 10. So I don't know if we know how many people actually listen to us, but I just thought it was kind of funny. So I had to share.
Well, I'll let Eric answer, but what I know about podcast metrics is that none of them are very accurate. Like if you look into any of them, it's really, really hard data to collect and for it to be accurate. So you can try to track downloads, but even that is often
Yeah.
not good. And then just because somebody downloaded doesn't mean they listened.
It might be the same person downloading it over and over.
Sure, yeah. But what that means is that we can make up whatever number we want, and
That's
I'm
right.
confident it's not 10. It's probably millions. Is really is that's what you need to tell your father-in-law?
Okay. All right.
I heard it. I'm
I
pretty
think
sure it's like 1.3 million.
the most played on podcast.com for us is 152.
Oh, wow. I'm actually pleasantly surprised. I do know 2 people who have told me they routinely listen to the podcast. So that's significantly more than my anecdotal evidence.
Yeah, I will say from other podcasts, it's whatever you're seeing, it's more than that. I'm confident about it because there's no way those metrics
we have
can
15
capture everything.
subscribers to our YouTube channel.
Yay!
All right. Well, I'm going to have to go back and tell my father-in-law that I was lying to him. But anyway,
totally off.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah, we probably should encourage them to like reach out, listeners, and tell us what they're liking, what they're not, what they want to hear more of, and give us some feedback. I think we're deep enough into this that we're ready to hear some feedback from listeners. So
I'm totally ready to hear great feedback.
We are ready for all the feedback that you would provide for us. I mean, we do.
Bobby, ignorance is bliss. We just had this conversation.
I've always said that the ship had sailed.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. No, I think it'd be great to hear if there's anything people are interested in, or if they have questions that they'd like us to talk about. Or
specific things. But any final thoughts on, for folks that are, not anywhere in their career, any stage in their career, and they're like, but I want to dig more into education and get better at this. Any final thoughts?
I would say, I think it's great that more and more people are interested in it. And so, yeah, I mean, whatever they have the ability to do at any time that they're asking about it, I think is what they should do, whether that is reading an article from JVME that they particularly like, having a conversation with somebody, or just full bore going into doing a master's degree. I don't know anybody who is gonna, well, I would hope that nobody in this group would do that, but I don't know anybody who has formal training in education that has somebody come to them and say, I want to learn more about education, is going to look at them and say, well, if you don't do a master's degree, then you're not really learning anything. I mean, I think as educators, it's in our nature to want to help people and help them at whatever level they are. Like I said, just having a conversation with somebody about, I don't know anything about educational research. Can you help me? Can you give me resources? Yeah, I can. He doesn't want to do a master's degree in education. I don't care. I'm just excited that he wants to do educational research the right way. So just asking having the conversation and starting that, I think, and not feeling like somebody's going to judge you for where you are is, I think, a really important step.
Eric?
Yeah, I love that. I was thinking, to not be intimidated and overwhelmed, and just realize like there's some pretty simple resources out there that those around you can provide. The learningscientist.org is one of my favorites recently, and they have a visual guide for like the 7 ways that people learn. It's a thin book, and it has a lot of cartoons and stuff, and I read it. I'm like, this is neat. This is very accessible. This is not going to take you very long, and you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah,
I love that. I think the last thing I will add is be patient. Like, this is a forever thing, right? Like it's just like anything else in vet med, like we're constantly learning, and you don't feel like you have to rush this. I think it would be easy for especially people who maybe have the veterinary degree, maybe went on and specialized in a discipline. Like everything's got like this time thing, and it's going to happen over this time, and there's a time limit. This does not have to be that way. Eric, you mentioned earlier your master's was like 4 or 5 years. Mine's probably going to be 6 when all is said and done. And that's perfect. Like, I've got a full-time job. You did yours during your that's okay. Go at your own pace. There's lots of things. So don't feel like you have to rush it either. This isn't something that's going to happen in a weekend. It's going to be forever. And that's a good thing. So yeah.
It's great.
Awesome.
Great topic,
well, thanks to you both, for sharing your ideas, and hopefully, folks listening will find some useful tidbits in this as well. But good chat as always. And I'll look forward to talking to you all next time.